Hello, my name is Waylon, and today I will be showing you how to set up your home network router. To begin, I will start off with showing you the different ports or plugs on the back of the router that you might need to be familiar with. The first one is going to be your power jack, where you actually plug your power cord into. That's located right here. The next one is going to be your reset plug, which is right next to it on this particular router that I'm showing you a picture of. Your reset plug is used if your router needs to be reset and you don't want to actually unplug it from the wall. You can just hit the reset button. It'll reboot it just like you reboot your computer. Now on this particular router, it has a USB port on it that you could use for sharing an external hard drive throughout your network. Not all routers have these. If you're looking for one, you have to find one specifically for sharing a network hard drive. The next port is the Internet port, or sometimes called the WAN port, W-A-N. Either way, no matter what it's called, it still does the same thing. This is the port that you will plug the network cable in, going from your router to your modem, whether you're on cable modem, DSL, or whatever broadband internet you may be using. And the 4 ports over to the left are your actual network ports for your local area network, or LAN is commonly referred to. It does not matter which one you're plugged into, all 4 ports do the same thing. You can plug up to 4 computers in hardwired on this particular router, or as you can see, they have the wireless antenna so that you can connect wirelessly. Okay. Once you take your router out of the box and you plug it in, get all your connections hooked up, the first thing you're going to need to do is you might be able to connect to it wirelessly with no password. However, I am not sure if all routers come like this, so I'm going to suggest that you actually plug in a cable going from your computer to the router itself to ensure that you have connectivity to the router. Once you have connected to the router, either whether it's wirelessly or hardwired in, you're going to need to open up your internet browser of choice and navigate to your IP address of your router. Now, if you do not already know the IP address of your router, you can refer to the documentation that came with your router, and it will tell you what your default IP address is, as well as your default username and password that we are going to need to log into it. For mine, it is 192. You can see I've actually been there before. It's 192.168.1.1. And this is a pretty common default address for Linksys routers, which is what I'm using. Just type that in, and you can either hit the go button or hit enter. Give it just a second. And this is the first page for the Linksys router that I am using. As you can see, we have various tabs along the top for different sections of setting up the router. The first one we're going to use is the Setup tab, which we're already on, and Basic Setup right underneath it. Underneath, some of these tabs have subsections underneath of them. So we're going to start with the Setup tab under Basic Setup. The first thing is the DHCP configuration. This is how your router actually pulls an IP address from your internet provider. If you have automatic configuration, I highly recommend you leave it there. That way your router can determine which type of internet you're using, and it'll already have the settings to pull your IP address. Your router name, your host name, your domain name, you can set if you want. You don't have to. These are optional. They just have, it'll give descriptions for your router whenever you're browsing through the network. Local IP address is going to be the IP address of your router. There's really no need to change this unless you're adding it to a network that already has a certain IP standard, then you can change it if you wish. Subnet mask, for most homes you will not need to change that, so I'll leave that alone. DHCP server, we want to leave this enabled. Just like at the top where we configured it for automatic configuration for DHCP, this is where your router pulls an IP address from the internet. I'm sorry, from your internet provider. Down here at the bottom is we're enabling your router to be a DHCP server for your network, which means when you plug your computer in, or if you connect to it wirelessly, your computer will pull an IP address from your router so that it can communicate with the router and communicate on the internet. Starting IP address by default is 100. You can leave that, you can change it. As long as it's a number between 1 and 254, and you have enough numbers under 254 to account for however many computers you need to use, you're fine. I'd recommend just leaving it where it's at. The rest of this information you can leave alone. You don't really need to mess with it. You can change the time zone to whichever time zone you're in. I am in Eastern. And before we leave this page, since I did make a change, we need to click on Save Settings at the bottom. Continue. Anytime you're on a page and you actually make a change, then you need to click on the Save Settings button at the bottom. Nothing on here will save automatically. The next tab we need to check, if you are going to set up wireless, we'll click on the Wireless tab. Here, if your wireless is not enabled, you may have an option here to click on Enable or Disable your wireless. In my case, it's turned on, so we don't have that option. Wireless network mode is you're going to want to choose either disabled or which mode you want to use. Depending on your computers, you may only be using wireless B wireless cards. If you are, you can choose B only. If you're only using G, you can choose G only. Or you may have one of the newer routers that offer N wireless network. If you do, you can choose whichever one you're using. G is the most common right now until more people start using the N version. I usually leave it on mix. That way, no matter what, if I have something with a B or G standard, I can use either one. You don't have to leave your wireless SSID broadcast enabled. However, it'll make it easier for you to connect to your wireless network. By having it enabled, when you open up your wireless network card utility, you can search and it'll find your wireless network and you can just connect to it and type in your password. If it is disabled, then you have to know the actual name of your wireless network in order to connect to it. So since I did not change anything here, I don't have to click on Save Settings. The next thing we're going to do is go to Wireless Security. And here is where you can decide if you want encryption, if you want to actually use a password to connect to your network, and if so, what type of encryption you want to use. Now, this is not actually my router. It's my roommate's router, so he's the one that chose WEP encryption. I would personally use either WPA or WPA2 personal. It's your choice. Whichever one you click on, you can click on WPA personal, and you have different options here. You may need to check with your wireless card. If you have an older wireless card, not all wireless cards can connect to any of these. So you may want to check with see which card you have and check the settings for that, see which one you can actually use. For this, since it's already set up with WEP, I'll leave it with WEP. And here's where you can type in your password. Now on this one, you can type in a phrase and click generate, and it'll generate an encrypted password based off of your phrase. If you use the WPA, you can actually just type in a phrase here, and that phrase is your password. So it's really whichever one you prefer using. If you want to just remember a word or a phrase, you can type it in there. If you want to remember, if you want something more complex, you can click on WEP and type it in there. Just have to make sure you write down your code and keep it in a safe place, because I don't know many people that would be able to remember that code. Once you have chosen which encryption you want to use, you would click on Save Settings. However, I am not for this because it's already set up and I didn't make any changes. After you click on Save Settings, you can technically connect wirelessly and you're good to go. You can get on the internet. You'll be able to surf. Oh, I'm sorry. Once you've connected with your computer, you will be able to get on the internet. Now I'll open up my wireless configuration so that you can see what it looks like. It'll bring this up. Now if you're not connected, it will not say connected right here. I'm currently connected wirelessly, but it'll come up and it'll show you all the wireless networks that it sees in your area. As you can see, there's quite a few around here, and you will find yours. Double click on it, or click on it once and click connect right here, which it'll say connect if you're not actually connected to it. Here, I'll click on one of these, and it'll come up, ask you for your password for that wireless network. You type it in, hit OK, and it'll connect for you, and it'll actually save it, so every time you turn your computer on and off, it'll automatically remember your password and it'll connect automatically, so you won't have to type that in each time. One thing I forgot to show you, under the basic wireless settings, wireless network name SSID. That's the actual name that will come up when you search for your wireless network. You can change this to whatever you want. If you want to make it something that lets people know that it's yours, if you want to make it something just completely random, it really doesn't matter. Just whatever you choose to put there. Now I'll show you a couple extra settings that you can change if you want. Under the Security tab, these are extra measures you can take to help keep hackers out, keep people from trying to break into your router. If you click on More over here on the right side, it'll actually open up a new page, and it gives you a description of each one of these. If your router has these options, it'll have a description to tell you what each one does, so you can decide if you wanted to enable it or not and actually block those. Okay, administration. Here is where you can change the password that you have to use to log into your router. Again, currently it should be set to the default password, which you can actually find from Google if you lose your documentation. So I highly recommend changing your password. Just type it in here, delete that, and then type your new password in, delete the bottom one, type your new password in again. Just make sure that both of those match or it won't save. Factory default. If you start making changes on your router, or your router just quits working, if you can still log into it, you can click on the factory defaults, click yes right here, and click save settings, and no matter what you've changed on the router, it'll automatically be set back to the way it was when you first took it out of the box. Firmware upgrade. You can think of firmware as the operating system of your router. It's what runs your router and tells it how to work. Periodically you'll want to check with the company that makes your router. If you have Linksys, then Linksys.com, or if you have a Belkin or a D-Link, just go to their respective websites check and see if you have an upgraded firmware available. If you do, you can download it and then you can upload it to your router right here. Click Browse. It'll open up File Explorer on your computer. Navigate to the file you downloaded, and then you can hit Upgrade, and it'll upgrade the firmware that's on your computer, or I'm sorry, on your router. Config Management. Once you've set your router up the way you like it and it's working good for you, you can click on the backup button. It'll allow you to save a settings file to your computer, so that if you ever do have to restore your router to the factory default settings, then you can come back here, browse, point to the file that you saved from your backup, and click Restore, and it'll restore all your settings back to your router. The last tab is Status, and here it just gives you an overview of your router. Tells us our firmware version, the current time on our router, the MAC address, the name, the domain name. This is actually the name for Roadrunner. That's the ISP that I'm using. Shows you your external IP address. Shows you your DNS servers if you need to know those for any reason. DHCP release and renew button. What this will do, if you click on the release, it will release, just like it says, it'll release its IP address that it got through the DHCP protocol. So it'll actually just disconnect you from the internet altogether, and then you hit DHCP renew, and it'll go out and ask the DHCP server for a new IP address. You really shouldn't have to use these. These are more of a troubleshooting technique if you're having problems connecting to the internet, or if your router is having problems connecting to the internet, which we can tell right here. Since we do have an external IP address, we can tell that our router is connecting to the internet no problems. If it ran into any kind of problem, the first thing that it would do is lose this IP address. If you click on local network, it'll show you the information for your local network, IP address of your router, that your DHCP is enabled. This is your first IP address that a computer can use for DHCP for a local IP address, and this is the last one that can be used. Now if you click on DHCP clients tables, that'll come up. It's going to show you all the IP addresses that are being used right now, and in most cases it'll tell you the name of the computer that's using them. So say if you have 2 computers in your house, but there's 5 IP addresses being used, then you know somebody's probably either hacked into your wireless network, or if you don't have a password, then they're maybe just sitting outside using it. So that way you'll be able to troubleshoot if your internet's running extremely slow for no apparent reason. Close that. Then wireless. This just gives you a brief overview about all of your wireless settings. And then we're back to the setup page, the original page we started at. That's pretty much it. There are some other settings, but I didn't go over the more advanced settings because 95% of people don't really have a reason to change any of them. That concludes this tutorial. I hope this has helped you in setting up your router. Thank you.